Good evening. I'm Amy Smith. As the second vice president of the League of Women Voters of Topsfield, Boxford, and Middleton, I'd like to welcome you to this candidates night. The League is a multi-issue, nonpartisan organization, and as such, never supports or opposes candidates or political parties. We do, however, take positions on issues that we've studied, and we do encourage active citizen participation in the democratic process. We applaud those who are running for office tonight, and you, the public, who are taking time to become informed about the issues and the candidates. Because of the pandemic, we are holding this forum virtually through a Zoom webinar. Normally, we would take written questions from an in-person audience. As this was not possible this year, we asked Middleton residents to send their questions to our League of Women Voters email. Unfortunately, we could not get to all the questions submitted, especially those that came in at the last minute, but we thank you all for sending them in. To be as transparent as possible, we need to tell you that we sent those questions out to candidates ahead of time. We want to remind people watching that your town election is Saturday, June 12th. It's from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Fuller Meadow School. As is our custom when sponsoring candidates nights in Boxford, Georgetown, Topsfield, and Middleton, we turn to a league member from out of town to moderate to preserve an unbiased, neutral ground. I'm very pleased to be tonight's moderator from Georgetown. Our timekeeper is Taylor Longstaff from Ipswich, and our tech support is Trudy Baker from Topsfield. I'll now explain the format for the evening. For each race, candidates will be introduced and speak in the order that they will appear on the ballot. They will have 1 minute to answer each question directed to all candidates. The order in which candidates speak will rotate with each question. After the question and answer period, candidates will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. Candidates speaking should take note of the time clock, which indicates how much time they have left to answer. At the end of the candidate question and answer section, Bill Renaud, Chair of the Master Development Committee, will speak on ballot question 1. Okay, we'll now begin. We're starting with the select board race, which is a 3-year term, and you will vote for 2 people. And we're going to start with Costa Printakis. Do you think it's a conflict of interest, or what are your feelings about having individuals hold multiple positions or seats in town government?
It is not a conflict, and I would argue it's an asset and a requirement. Several committees, master plan, community preservation, for example, require selectmen membership as part of their town meeting approved composition. By participating in multiple committees, a selectman gets a better understanding of the challenges facing Middleton. Through the years, I have accepted non-selectman open committee seats because nobody else was willing to do the job. My current service on the Masco School Committee is a prime example. In May of 2012, there was an open position on the committee with no candidates on the ballot, despite an extensive search for volunteers. With several voters writing my name in, I accepted the seat rather than allow Middleton to go underrepresented. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Baradino. You're muted, Mr. Baradino.
Hello all. I grew up in Everett and raised my children in Malden. These cities fill committee spots through appointment. Here in Middleton, it's a bit different. If you choose to volunteer for something that you may have a passion for, you need to be on the ballot and be elected. Myself, in this election, I'm on the ballot for 3 positions. Selectman because I have a desire to use my life experiences to be an independent voice and the best of my ability guide the town's future. The library I've always supported as a friend, and I think it's a vital part of the community. The Housing Authority, because there was no one else, I was elected with write-in ballot for 2 votes. Finally, I have time on my schedule. I've been involved with charities and community service volunteering my entire life. As exalted ruler of the Elks, president of Kiwanis, and president of the Chamber of Commerce. I will always encourage my family to do the same. I would encourage more people to come forward to these positions and volunteer in our great community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bernhardt.
I think it's great that people want to be involved in the community and they want to get involved in all these boards, but it's very hard to it's very hard to delegate your time towards excuse me, your time towards one board when it's you have life, you have family, you have all these other boards going on that you want to be part of. How can you delegate your time to a specific board and give you full attention to what the community needs when you're on multiple positions in the town? I think that, you need to be on one board, and that's the board you need to represent for full, transparency of what the community really needs.
Thank you. Mr. Garber.
I think it depends on how the different boards you're on interact and relate. Like right now, I'm on the planning board and board of assessors. They really have nothing to do with each other. Actually, the planning board I was written in on. If I'm elected selectman, I'll give both those seats up to devote my full time to being a selectman. I will say from being on those boards, it's really given me an insight to how different things in town run. I've actually taken, years ago, I was on the Board of Appeals. I've taken classes as a Board of Assessor member. I've taken classes as a Board of Appeals member. And I think having that experience interacting with a diverse amount of residents and different people on different boards really prepared me to be selectman. But if I am elected selectman, I will give up my other two elected current board seats.
Thank you. That's Ms. Lindberg. And you're muted here.
Hi, am I unmuted now?
You're fine.
So I don't believe it's a conflict of interest. Personally, I sat on and was elected to two boards simultaneously. So I was on the planning board 15 years and then simultaneously was on the Board of Selectmen for 9 years. I think in small towns the size of Middleton, you're going to see the same people kind of volunteering for different boards and committees. And I agree with Costa. I think it's an asset to be able to have that wide range of experience and understanding of what's going on in different aspects of the community. So I don't see it as a conflict of interest. And however, I would like to see more people get involved in local government. And I think it's, I'm very excited to see so many people here tonight to talk about the issues.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, do you think the town needs more sidewalks and pedestrian amenities? And would you support using taxpayer dollars to support it? And we'll start with you, Mr. Berardino.
I believe public safety is a major priority, and there needs to be a balance between pedestrian safety, recreational space, and finances. As the community sees growth, sidewalks are being addressed in each new development. Maybe we could take that a little further and require that developments make access and be linked through trails or pathways to each other. Take, for example, the municipal building project. There should be access wherever possible to connect neighborhoods to the property on all sides. I also believe the town needs to be more aggressive applying for state and federal grants and seek private funds to accomplish this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bernhardt.
As a lifelong resident of Middleton, I understand that, growth has to happen. I used to play hockey out in front of my house and with my friends and maybe have a car go by so often, but now I still live in the same house after 42 years. I can't even walk my dog outside. I understand we need more pedestrian ways, we need sidewalks, but we also have to come to a realization that it's not, I wouldn't put the burden on our taxpayers. We have to come up with all the amenities possible where we can look at all the avenues that we can possibly get money and financing from. And then, and we need to keep the developers on the hook when they're doing these big developments to participate in, expansion of our pedestrian walkways.
Thank you. Mr. Garber.
Now, being on the planning board, I get a unique perspective on this. I do think some tax dollars should be used for pedestrian amenities. I think the best use of the sidewalk fund actually is in planning and engineering. So we can have sidewalk ready to go. So when developers come to town with big projects, they're ready to go, and we can actually have the developers build them rather than contribute to the sidewalk fund, because they can build it a lot cheaper than the town can due to prevailing wage. I think the other thing to remember, when a project comes, the sidewalk that we ask them to construct doesn't necessarily have to be abutting the project they're doing. It should go where the most need is. I think right now, the priority should be connecting the new rail trails, which I don't know if anybody has been down there, but they're really nice and they're growing. And I think the priority should be to connect, to make the connections to the rail trails so that the rail trails people can walk to the rail trails and walk the rail trails. That would be the priority for sidewalks that I would want to see done.
Thank you. Ms. Lindberg.
This is something the town's been struggling to address for a number of years. As I said, and I said on the planning board, we would have developers contribute to a sidewalk fund to allow us to put sidewalks in those high travel areas in town on major roads, et cetera. We also tried to do some work behind town hall to make walking paths, et cetera. I think it's, unfortunately, when we tried to do the development down at the landfill, it didn't pass town meeting. So I think it's a broader conversation that the community has to have. It's a priority that the community has to address and come behind, because the boards and committees can only do so much. But if the community isn't going to support it at town meeting, then it's not going to get done. So I think that we should have a comprehensive plan as to how we're going to address that and continue to move forward to try to resolve some of these issues.
Thank you. Mr. Printakis.
Yes to both parts of the question. The challenge with sidewalks is the narrowness of the right-of-way of some of our older streets like River, Liberty, Kenny, which make adding sidewalks without acquiring land or easements impossible. With my support, the selectmen have adopted a complete streets policy that requires streets be viewed for the use of pedestrian, bicyclists, and cars. This policy will improve streets for users over time. In the short term, the policy helped us obtain grants that allowed us to reconstruct the Liberty Maple Street intersection, making a connection to the rail trail easier. The rail trail is being developed by a combination of CPA funds, state grants, and fundraising. The section between Essex and Howe Manning was completed, and it is a beautiful, enjoyable, and safe place to walk. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3. How do you define your budget priorities when tough decisions have to be made? And we'll start with Mr. Bernhardt.
When it comes to budgeting, whether it's a town, a business, or your home life, you need to separate the wants and the needs. Unfortunately, budgeting is very difficult, and in the end, you cannot make everyone happy. And sacrifices will be made. But priority to those sacrifices, you need to reach out to everybody and find out what the needs are and what the residents really want. The town and the employees and the town officials. It's tough decisions when you come to budgets. They can't be made quickly. You can't all of a sudden just go, all right, this is our budget, this is what we have. You need to gather all the information at that point. You can make a decision on the best interests of the town once you know all the knowledge.
Thank you. Mr. Garber.
I think the priorities, the two most important things in the town is public safety in the schools. Those should be the priorities. I'm on the Board of Assessors. We had asked for some extra office help this year. We didn't get it, and I understand that because there are priorities. I think talking about budgeting and talking about taxes, I think there has to be a discussion about tax classification. Right now, commercial and residential properties pay the same tax rate. It may be time, especially with this big municipal facility project coming, that the selectmen need to take a look at maybe a small tweak in the classification. It's something that's up to the selectmen. It's their sole choice to do that once a year. And I think that all the candidates really need to state where they feel on that. We used to have mom and pop business. We had N&J Donuts, owner occupied. Now we have this, now that's a CVS. We have a lot of corporate owned buildings. The mix of the commercial property has changed, and it may be time to take a look at that. And there is also we could do an exemption for small businesses to give them some help. It's in the law for businesses valued at less than $1 million with fewer than 10 employees.
Thank you. Ms. Lindberg.
Well, a budget document is not just numbers on a page. It is really reflective of the priorities that are set by the community. Again, in our town and per our charter, it is the selectmen's budget. So the selectmen are the ones who are going to set the priorities as to whether you're going to use your discretionary spending for what those priorities are. So with the budget, you have mandated spending that you have to make towards schools and other contractual obligations. And then there's discretionary spending, which you can then set those priorities as to how you're going to address certain needs. We have capital plans laid out so that we know exactly what we need to do every year to address infrastructure and buildings and large projects. But we also need to have more community input as to what priorities they would like us to set for spending our tax dollars.
Thank you. Mr. Prentakis.
By analyzing the impact of decisions for the present as well as the future and deciding in favor of what will provide the greatest value. In the past few years, the board has looked at future financial impacts before finalizing the decision for next year's budget. For example, in 2015, I realized that Middleton's incoming Masco class would be larger than Topsfield's or Boxford's, which would cause an increase in our Masco assessment. By looking at the long-term impact, we were able to rearrange priorities and lower the tax burden on the town. This analytic approach has allowed us to add needed staffing to the fire, police, and DPW while keeping taxes lowest in the Tri-Town. The average single-family home in Middleton pays $2,200 less in taxes than Topsfield and Boxford.
Thank you. And Mr. Baradina.
Thank you. I think to be successful, you need to have a clear, responsible direction, a cornerstone theme of controlling finances, and have a continual capital planning exercise for the future of our families and the community. Continue to provide excellent, cost-effective education and opportunities for our children, and increase services for the elderly and underserved members of the community. Always continue to make public safety a budget priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4, which is a multi-part question. Do you support the municipal building project? Or how do you suggest the town move forward with the municipal buildings project challenge? And what process would you suggest to gain consensus among community members? And we'll start with Mr. Garber.
As everyone knows, we desperately need a fire station. I think trying to do it all at once is going to slow down the progress of getting a fire station. I think we should go with the original plan that was presented at town meeting when we bought the land, which would be a fire station first, then a senior center. And then I would think when the debt from the library is paid off, then a police station. And I'm not sure if we even need a new town hall. I'd rather see that one renovated. Being on the planning board, developers come, we tell them we want colonial looking buildings. That is an old New England town hall. The library, some people in Middleton don't know, that is not a new library. That's a renovated, beautiful building. I think we can do the same thing with town hall. I think its location, where it is, and the stature of it, I think it should be preserved. The other thing is if we preserve the town hall, we can use community preservation dollars, which we've all paid into. If we build a new one, we can't. So that, I think right now it's too much, too fast. It's gonna, over the life of everything, cost each homeowner, average homeowner, about $20,000 and more taxes. I just think it's too much, too fast. And I think we should really concentrate on getting a fire station, which we desperately need right now in the ground, and not try and do a huge project that's gonna delay the fire station building.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lindberg.
Yeah, I think there's no question that these buildings need to be addressed, police, fire, COA, and the town hall. But I'm not in favor of doing that all at once. I'm not in favor of the warrant article asking for all the money up front. I work by day for a town. I've sat on these committees as part of my job. I've worked on these large public construction projects, and a town the size of Middleton, quite honestly, does not have the staff available to oversee a project of that magnitude, to ensure that it's done right, that it's done on time, and it's done on budget. I think that the fire station definitely is first and foremost on that list of buildings that need to be addressed. I'm dismayed to see that there is not a second warrant article allowing that if the present warrant article isn't approved, that the fire station isn't going to be moving forward. And I think that's a disservice to the town and to the firefighters.
Thank you. Mr. Printakis.
I support the current plan, which was put together from public input and complies with the planning principles adopted by town meeting. Our facilities have reached a point of inadequacy. For the past 25 years, we have not invested in them because of the lack of sufficient, well-located land. We finally own the former golf course, a great location. The financial management policies for which I advocated have resulted in strong reserves and a high bond rating. In addition, we currently enjoy historically low interest rates. Now is the time to address our needs and not waste money on Band-Aid approaches. This proposal meets our long-term needs at the lowest long-term cost. No one has identified a solution that costs less over a 30-year period. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berardino.
Yes, I do support the project. I'm not quite familiar with all of the aspects of it. I've seen a couple of presentations. I've talked to several people about it. I do believe that our buildings do need to be either upgraded or replaced. I'm not quite ready to make my final decision. While very important to our community, I would still like to hear from more of our friends and neighbors. And from these discussions, we'll make the right decision. It's a tremendous amount of money, and the tax override is a huge consideration. And my fear is that we may price some of our seniors that have been in town for a long time out of their homes with these tax increases. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bernhardt.
I do support the project. The public safety buildings, without doubt, need to be done. It's for the betterment of our community and safety. We're behind in the times. We're not up to date in standards. That it's just a simple fact. There are, first responders that cannot do their job without the adequate tools. And that doesn't just affect each department, but it affects all of us as a community and as residents. I understand the interest rates and the cost of materials change constantly. I was in construction for a very long time. I understand the variables, but when you're throwing out large numbers of $61 million around, it makes people nervous, especially when backing it up. You have to have possible grants and assumed donations. I think everybody in the public needs to know what is going on and what we have to do to get the.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the next question is, and I hope Mr. Bernhardt can unfreeze himself for that. Last question is, during COVID, town boards and committees have been able to meet using Zoom and similar web-based technologies. This has enabled the public to more easily watch and participate in meetings. At some point, we will return to in-person meetings. Do you support allowing hybrid meetings so that the public can participate remotely? And we'll start with Ms. Lindberg.
Well, public meetings in Massachusetts are governed by the open meeting law, which is set by the state legislature and overseen by the Attorney General's office. So any decisions as to how we're going to move forward once this public health emergency is declared over is going to have to come from the state legislature. Once they do make those decisions, we'll have to look to see what they're going to offer the cities and towns as an option for going forward with any kind of a hybrid model or any other kind of options for remote.
Thank you. And I may remind candidates when they're not speaking, if you would mute, please. Mr. Protakis.
Yes, if it is legally possible by the Commonwealth and the open meeting laws. I have long been a proponent of public participation in local government. I championed the introduction of designated public comment periods at select meetings, and I have held citizen feedback sessions. The amount of public input we have received in the past year through remote participation channels has been fantastic, and I am in favor of their continuation. Even when committees eventually begin meeting in person, I support making those proceedings publicly available online to allow questions and comments from community members not physically present. And hopefully the legislature will give communities the option of doing just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Baradino.
Thank you. Again, I concur with everybody else. I'm not 100% certain on this, but the government by public meeting laws and not certain if virtual participation is allowed. We'll have to wait for the government to decide. But at a minimum, all meetings should be broadcast and recorded for replay or stream live. My biggest priority is to encourage folks to be involved at every meeting and remind Middleton residents that all our voices need to be heard and encourage people to get involved, whether in person or through video streaming. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, reminder, just please mute if you're not speaking. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Bernhardt. And you're muted.
I think that during COVID, it was very, it was great that we still have a way to involve the public with everything that was going on in the town. I think there's an issue with
Mr. Bernhardt, we can't, your signal's very garbled. Could you, if you don't mind, if you could maybe.
We need to continue this going forward, even if we in face-to-face.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garber.
I think all the town boards need to meet in person together as soon as possible. As a member of the planning board, I don't think that we've done it. I think we could have done more things if we met in person. When you have a petitioner come before a board like a planning board and there's a big plan in front of you, a full-size plan, and we're talking about buffer zones and stuff, and the petitioner is offering different options and we can see it. I don't know about anyone else, but I really can't scale a plan on a Zoom screen. I think that, I hope that the legislature on June 15th, when the state of emergency is over, does not extend the ability for board members to meet on Zoom. I think all board members and all town employees should be in their offices and working. I'm okay with the meetings also being shown on Zoom if it doesn't interfere with the productivity of the meeting. But we always have shown them on local cable access and replay them, but I think it is just so important. I think that's the reason our school committee has been so successful and so productive this year, is because they were the board that met in person, and I think that was great. And I think all town boards, and it's time for everybody to get back to work.
Thank you. We'll now go to closing statements. And we'll start with Mr. Printakis.
Thanks to the league for organizing tonight's event, and to all the teachers, municipal employees, and first responders who have kept our town safe and functioning. I have been actively involved in our town through volunteering and serving in various appointed and elected positions. I have led the way in adopting financial management policies, which have resulted in Middleton having strong financial reserves and its highest bond rating. During my time as selectman, we have made many improvements to Middleton's basic infrastructure, our schools, and have added staffing to police, fire, and DPW to meet the needs of our growing town. Through thoughtful planning, the average single-family home in Middleton pays $2,200 less in taxes than in Topsfield and Boxford. Let's continue the work of wisely investing in our infrastructure, our people, and facilities while maintaining financial stability. I ask for your vote by early voting or on June 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berardino.
Thank you to the league for hosting this event and those watching at home. Middleton is a fantastic town, one that I'm proud to call my home. That is why many of us chose to live here and raise our families. It has also becoming more attractive to developers for housing and business opportunities. We need to manage that growth. We can encourage smart planning that will grow our tax base without sacrificing the quality of life that we have come to expect. If I have the opportunity to serve you on the Board of Selectmen, I will be looking to utilize my business skills to provide insight on managing the town's future, while relying on my personal experiences and strong values to find opportunities to improve the quality of life for all our residents. I hope that you will consider me with your friendship, your support, and your vote. God bless you and your families. Thank you again and have a great night.
Thank you. Mr. Bernhardt. You're muted.
I just want to thank
Mr. Bernhardt, why don't you try turning off your video? You might want to try turning off your video. That might help your signal. Okay, thank you. Start again.
Okay. I just want to thank the League of Women Voters for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight. This past year, people have been paying more attention to what is going on in the community, which is unbelievable. Full transparency is better for all communication. This is one reason I'm running for selectman, to bring those changes to the board. I will be a different voice. Everyone who knows me knows that I will represent their voice on the issues and projects at hand. I've lived in Middleton my whole entire life, 42 years. I've seen the changes, been through changes, and I think we need to get on the same page and let our community know what is going on with our taxpayer dollars and our community structure to make it a better living environment for our children and for our children's children to be able to grow up in Middleton, which is a great community. I was honored to be represented here tonight, and if you would vote for me on June 12th or before, I would definitely appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Garber.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I think this is a great forum. I believe the most important job of selectmen is to serve the residents. In my business, I always stress customer service. I intend to do that as a selectman. I think you've heard me many times tonight call on my experience on other town boards that I've worked with. I think I bring a lot to the table because of working in town in so many different boards and so many diverse boards that it just gives me a lot of points of view from different people. I think the board that's given me the most insight is the Board of Assessors to see what really goes into the tax rate. As far as the facilities project, it's not up to any of us. It's not up to the selectmen. It's up to the voters at town meeting and on the ballot, and whatever the voters decide, I will fully support it and work my best to make that happen. There's a lot of good choices tonight. You have 5 choices. I want to stress that everybody gets 2 votes, and I hope that everyone uses their 2 votes. Your second vote is as important as your first vote, and you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't vote for 2 of any of these qualified candidates.
Thank you. And Ms. Lindberg.
Oop.
You're right. You're fine.
Oh, okay. So thank you. Sorry. You know, I strongly believe in public service. This is something that I am passionate about. I do this by day. I work for municipal government for another town, and I have volunteered my time to this community for a number of years. So I served 15 years on the planning board. I've served 9 years as a selectman. And in 2016, I didn't run for re-election because I was going back to graduate school nights and weekends to get my master's in public administration. Since that time, I've also sought any kind of training that I could get, and I'm become a designated MCPPO, which is a certified public purchasing official. So I have the education and experience to volunteer to the Board of Selectmen and to bring that experience and to serve the town.
Thank you very much. Now we will turn to the race for the Elementary School Committee. That's 2 seats for 3-year term. And we're going to start with Michelle Aitken. And the first question is, what do you think are the top 3 most important issues the school district will face in the next 3 years?
Thank you. The 3 most important issues I feel our district faces within the next 3 years are: 1, addressing the social emotional needs of the students and providing them with the resources they need to put the pandemic behind them and get back to normal life. 2, uncovering and addressing any learning loss to get the students to where they should be academically. Even though I mentioned learning loss, I want to highlight some of what the students gained during this time. The ability to be flexible. They showed resilience, perseverance, self-management, which are all found within the Tri-Town Union's vision statement. These traits can be very helpful in uncovering new ways for them to catch up academically. 3, repairing the division between some families in town and creating new unity. I understand that this is out of the scope for a school committee member. However, there is no reason why it can't set an example of how to bring us back together, whether elected or not. Depending on how old your children are, parents have at least another 6 years of attending school and sporting events. This rift can't go on. It's not healthy, it's not productive, and it doesn't set a good example for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
Well, first, a special thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting us tonight. In terms of my top 3 priorities, first, I'd place an emphasis on social emotional learning. While we're making great progress on the physical health aspects of this pandemic, the ripple effects of COVID manifest themselves in the form of mental health challenges. Kids are being hospitalized every week, so we need to make sure more than ever that we grow our social emotional learning practices. Second, I'd like to see more focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a question later on that touches upon DE&I, so I'll just say that it's really important that our students have their very diverse needs addressed in order to be able to be an equitable education. And then finally, the relationship with our educators. I really value and respect the teachers and administrators that serve our children. I understand there are parents who have personal experiences of abuse that are different from mine, I want to continue hearing from these parents so I can best serve the community.
Thank you. Mr. Bourgeois.
Yeah, so the first issue for me, I believe, will be emerging from the pandemic and diagnosing and remediating issues of student learning loss with regard to both academics and social emotional learning. The second issue will be closing the persistent achievement gaps for our high needs student population as a requirement of the Student Opportunity Act. And the third issue will be unifying our school community, as the pandemic has caused a considerable amount of polarization and division between stakeholders and stakeholder groups. We need to heal and move forward, working together in the best interest of all students.
Thank you. Mr. Buser. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Great. Well, thank you for having me. And it looks like we can all agree on one thing. One, understand and close on the social and emotional gaps in our children caused by the COVID era. Identify and understand the extent of this problem and within the scope of the role towards solving it appropriately. Signs are on the wall. We're spending more and more on an uptick in the use of aides within the school. People work one-on-one with the kids on a daily basis in real time. Why is this happening? What is the optimal, truly solution that can help solve the underlying cause? If we prioritize things like this and address it in a financially prudent way, we can help make up lost time. Two, fair education, educational equity, whatever you want to call it. Providing the right educational services to meet every child's needs where they are to challenge them and foster development, whether they're academically at grade level, below grade level, or above grade level, including, of course, our special needs population. We don't want the ones in the middle that traditionally get lost. And three, in a nutshell, reinforce core academic rigor and quality. Masco High School, which we feed into, used to be top 10, now it's top 100. We can all do better, and it starts with elementary.
Thank you. Ms. Dubois.
I believe the three topics that are important in the upcoming school year for our district will be regionalization, literacy instruction, and, as everyone else, social emotional learning. Regionalization of the Tri-Town School Union is a topic that will likely be revisited in coming years. This is a difficult and complex topic to address. There are both benefits and drawbacks to regionalization. A thorough and well-informed investigation into this option is warranted to determine whether regionalization is the appropriate course of action for our Tri-Town community. Regarding literacy instruction, my role in the Tri-Town CPAC has provided opportunities to engage in conversations regarding potential upcoming changes in the instruction of literacy for our district and many others. A combination of recent updated guidance from the DESE on dyslexia and early detection, paired with long-standing questions about balanced literacy versus structured literacy, is likely to be an important issue for our youngest learners over the next 3 years. When you improve literacy for the most struggling learners, you improve literacy for all learners.
Thank you. Question 2. What is your understanding of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act and a school committee member's responsibility to adhere to it? And we'll start with Mr. Alexander.
Thank you. To summarize my understanding of FERPA, these are regulations that provide for the privacy of student academic records. There are exceptions built in, and parents have the right to sign release forms and waivers in order to have their records released when needed. As a prospective school committee member, I certainly appreciate the gravity of protecting sensitive student information. I spent the last 20 years working for the Department of Defense, protecting the nation's most sensitive information. So I certainly am accustomed to these practices. And I think that as the world changes, we rely more and more on online resources. We need to be more than ever vigilant when it comes to protecting the student information. As we consider some of the traditional pitfalls, for instance, a student who needs resources outside of the immediate Middleton school district, we need to make sure that processes are followed, releases are signed, and that anyone who may be given provided sensitive information is an accredited organization capable of protecting this information.
Thank you. Mr. Bourgeois.
The FERPA regulations are contained in a 32-page document, and I believe that there are two primary aspects for a school committee member to be aware of. The first is that parents or guardians have the right to access any information that may exist about their child. The second guarantees that any identifiable student information shall remain confidential unless the parent or guardian agrees to a release with a few special exceptions. As a school committee member, my role will be to ensure that policies are in place that align with FERPA, and that if I become aware of any identifiable student information, that I understand that it needs to be treated as highly confidential, similar to information discussed in an executive session of the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buser. You're
Oh,
muted.
sure. Yep. FERPA, I think they've got pretty good definitions. I associate it similar to HIPAA, right? We all know HIPAA, it protects our medical records. FERPA is kind of the same thing for student records, right? Essentially. HIPAA and information privacy is something I deal with professionally on a day-to-day basis. I work in healthcare IT, so I understand the importance of the integrity of maintaining security around information. It's of course, as was stated, I can't argue with that school committee and the school adheres to all the regulations and requirements, which probably don't change as much as HIPAA does, but you do need to keep, obviously it's important to stay in lockstep with how these regulations evolve, and that they are accessible, of course, to the right people. Data, of course, this information could be anonymized for use, and that's becomes actionable information. That's what my company does in healthcare analytics. So I'm really saying that I understand the importance of data, but it has to be the right kind of data when it comes to my role, when it comes to using data in the context of my role within the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dubois.
I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding of FERPA and the Massachusetts regulations is that privacy and confidentiality of student records is paramount. As an education professional, these are laws I'm familiar with upholding. These laws prohibit schools from disclosing personal identifiable information from the student record to a third party without written consent of the parent or eligible student, except in limited circumstances. These laws also grant certain rights to parents and eligible students, including their right to access the records, as was already mentioned, and the right to request the information be amended or deleted, and the right to add relevant comments, information, or other written materials to the student record. As a school committee member, I will abide by these laws and seek assistance from town council when necessary to fulfill my responsibilities under these laws. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, Ms. Aiken.
Thank you. Yes, just going along with what everyone else said, my understanding is that this act, FERPA, is the federal law that protects the privacy of a student's record. Generally, only a parent or an eligible student may have access to their record unless there is written consent. Changes can be made to the record by either a hearing or an amendment. As a potential school committee member, I interpret FERPA as being very similar to what Greg said, HIPAA. When working in a hospital, it is my responsibility to never release any information about my patients. Here, it would be my responsibility to never release any information on a student, and also never to go into a student's record unless legally obligated to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3. What is your plan for cultivating a productive and collaborative labor management relationship with educators? And we'll start with Mr. Bourgeois.
So one of the roles of the school committee is to set goals for the district, and then the superintendent implements those goals through the day-to-day operations of the schools. I believe that one of the goals that should be considered is improving the labor management relationship with educators. And it's a critical component of healing the stakeholder divisions that have been caused by the pandemic. In working to repair that relationship, I would strongly advocate for an interest-based bargaining approach to future negotiations as another potential way to build mutual respect and trust between labor and management. This approach to negotiations brings both parties together to collaboratively problem solve, seeking consensus solutions as a team while building relationships and trust. This is in stark contrast to a traditional adversarial bargaining approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buser.
Sure. I'm actually going to reframe this question. I think we should start by asking the question, what is the plan to cultivate a productive, positive educational experience for our students, enabled by the parents, the labor, the teachers, and the administrators, and the volunteers all working together with the community? How do we do it? Communication and being respectful, but most of all, being transparent. No private backroom meetings, I don't, no matter how many vague platitudes of how innocuous they are, keep everything out in the open. This stuff is too important. Let's put all the Facebook, social media nonsense that a small groups are involved. Let's just put it in the rearview mirror. Let's have a courageous conversation like we call it at HR. Let's acknowledge there's a huge rift between the union and many families, and let's work together to solve it. I always promise to act in good faith with empathy in all discussions. But please understand, I'm not here to be a union patsy. I'm here to be a firm, independent, informed negotiator with global professional management experience and empathy for everyone's needs. And most of all, I come to the table as an unwavering advocate for the people and children of Middleton. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dubois.
Professionally, as a BCBA or behavior consultant, it's often my role to work collaboratively and productively with both school administration, staff, and families in order to come to an agreement based on my professional recommendations, always balancing input from all parties, yet striving for the best outcome for the individual student. My experience with working objectively and collaboratively within the education system is a skill I already possess and I demonstrate regularly. I believe it's important to acknowledge that both sides influence this relationship. And as a newcomer, I'm unfamiliar with exactly what this process looks like. But in order to cultivate a productive and collaborative labor management relationship with the educators, I would begin with actively listening to both parties. As a newcomer, I would be asking many informed questions in order to fully understand what it is being asked by both sides and determine what those roadblocks are. Actively listening to all parties and approaching conversations with an empathetic and collaborative mindset, as well as encouraging those around me to do the same. Our school committee must work collaboratively with all stakeholders, and this is the only way to ensure the best outcome for all students.
Thank you. Ms. Aiken.
Thank you. In order to have a productive relationship, I feel that we need to have clear lines of communication, a mutual respect for each other, an understanding of what our priorities and goals are for the short and long term, and how we can provide each other with the resources on how to achieve these goals. I think that we can all agree that when it comes to elementary education, the children's needs come first. However, the health and well-being of the teachers and staff has a direct effect on the students. Teamwork within the school committee and educators is key here. If we have good communication and a good understanding of our goals, I don't see how our relationship can't be productive. Perhaps some kind of team building event between the school committee and educators based on what's allowed under open meeting law can be held in order to kick off a new school year and start off on a high note. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
First, I want to take a moment just to reach out to the very talented and caring educators in this town and just say thank you. In terms of building the relationship, what all we'll do is listen and be respectful. In my mind, relationship building is all about the social norms or rules that a group agrees to. And I'd first recommend that the school committee and educators refresh these ground rules. Next, I'd build trust and lowering walls by being open and genuine. And finally, I would foster inclusiveness. I would listen to them and consider their perspectives. At the end of the day, I may not agree with their views or perspectives on some given topic, but as educators who spend hundreds of hours per year with our children, they deserve to be heard. I believe educators are what make our schools so desirable, and we need to work with them. There was no graduate course on how to teach during a pandemic, and as they discover new challenges while serving our children, they too will need to be supported.
Thank you. Question 4. How can schools better address issues of racism, classism, gender discrimination, religious discrimination, xenophobia, and other forms of bigotry? And we'll start with Mr. Buser.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. Of course, all children have the right to learn.
I got it if you want to watch it.
Hello? Have the right to learn an environment that's free from discrimination and harassment, and the school district has an obligation to stop it. It's harassment and bullying. You know, at a young age, the groundwork for kindness is empathy. That is the cornerstone of all this. That's what we need to do. And I applaud Fuller and Howe and what they've done for my 4 kids over the years to lay this base work. How do we support it? Maintain strong policy, clear escalations. They're in place, but again, a continuous improvement approach will only enhance things and make things better. Teach facts, but also a treat, across the board, lay the appropriate groundwork for the appreciation and celebration of all the differences within people, gender, race, culture, and appreciation for it at an age-appropriate way at this level. Empathy for young children who may act out. There's a root cause behind that. There's no cancel culture for a kid who makes a mistake at a very young age. People, personal views, Democrat, liberal, out of the classroom, focus on the education. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dubois.
First, I would like to note that ableism is also another form of discrimination that is not included in the list above. And I know that that is something that the CPAC has already begun to address with MASCO and making sure that that's included in upcoming policies and procedures as well. On top of that, my work with the DASH program, which is the Disabilities Awareness Program that's been in existence in the Tri-Town community for 25 years now, the work that I've done over the past 5 years is essentially laying the groundwork for inclusion as it relates to disabilities, but it shows how education can be done for families and students and the community on topics of inclusion. This obviously needs to be expanded to include all of the other areas mentioned, and also additional work with curriculum that is culturally representative, and education for our students and communities, which include updated curriculum that's inclusive and culturally responsible. And I also believe our social emotional curriculum would tie into this as well.
Thank you. Ms. Aiken.
Thank you. In order to address these issues, there needs to be an emphasis on empathy, tolerance, and diversity. Empathy and tolerance can definitely be taught at home, but from what I've seen in our schools, our staff does a great job in teaching this in the classroom. Given the basis of our student body, diversity could be a challenge for Middleton. However, in my opinion, diversity doesn't have to be about race. It could be different traditions one household has from another, discussing different parts of the world that our students and teachers visit, and different traditions they witness, and talking about the history of them and how they've evolved today. I'd also like to take a look at what the schools are doing to promote a more diverse application base when there are open positions. I know that we have no control on what families move to Middleton, but it would be nice to see more diversity in our staff so that the students of color can see themselves in their teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
After 15 months of researching diversity, equity, and inclusion, the three biggest things that we can do are listen, educate, and then celebrate DE&I. Let's start by listening. We have a town full of beautifully diverse families. Let's hear from them. Let's hear from the Asian parents who are dealing with the hate pandemic. Let's hear from the gay parents whose child needs to explain to their friends why it's okay to have two fathers. And let's hear from the introverted students' parents on how they're dealing with bullying. Let's just listen. Then let's educate our teachers and our administrators. Let's focus on things like unconscious bias and emphasize how to teach about the infinite dimensions of diversity and why these are great things to have in a community. Then let's educate our children to be caring, accepting, and inclusive students. And then finally, let's celebrate. Diversity is a wonderful thing and it's meant to be celebrated. Let's continue to bake diversity culture into our academic programs, and let's make DE&I a pillar of school events. There's lots we can do that doesn't cost a dime.
Thank you. And last up, Mr. Bourgeois.
I believe the best way to address bigotry is through education. And it begins with continuous and ongoing education of our faculty through high quality professional development. This is supplemented by the implementation of curriculum at all grades as required by the state's anti-bullying laws. This issue is very close to me at heart because I have a gay sibling who dealt with bullying while in school beginning in 2nd grade. I also have several mixed race nieces and nephews that are in elementary schools in Massachusetts. Our school community should strive to ensure that no child feels isolated or ostracized, and that our school buildings are places where our differences can be embraced and celebrated. The Safe Schools program at the Department of Education is a wonderful resource to provide technical assistance, professional development, and curriculum recommendations. We must strive to make sure that our schools are welcoming, accepting, and supportive of all students. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final question. On return to school this past year, what decision did you make for your children regarding school? Were they homeschooled, remote, or did they return? And what was your reasoning for the decision that you made? And we'll start with Ms. Dubois.
As a parent, community member, and school committee candidate, I have respected and continue to respect the decision each family has had to make regarding the best mode of education for their children during this unprecedented year. It is not my place to judge or question what others decided was right for them. The fact is, both of our children were in school full-time, in person. Our daughter Hattie has significant special needs, and while she qualified for the high needs population, Middleton did not have a definitive plan for returning to school until the end of August. If in the event that Hattie needed to be home remote, I would have been her full-time one-on-one special education teacher, which allowed me no time to help our son, who is in 6th grade, during the school day if he required it. Consequently, we decided to send our son Warren, who's in 6th grade, to St. Mary's in Danvers because they had a comprehensive plan available for the start of the school year that phased students in from a hybrid model to a full in-person model by mid-October. This allowed us to focus on meeting Hattie's needs, which were initially in remote, but then she quickly phased into full in-person in her substantially separate classroom at Howe Manning. They were both very successful and had healthy years.
Thank you. Ms. Aiken.
This past year, I really wanted my kids to be in the classroom with their friends and teachers. However, I was very honest with them on what school would look like with all of the DESE guidelines put into place. I gave them the option to be homeschooled by me, which as a family we ultimately decided on. This was the one option that gave our family consistency from September to June. Looking at our lifestyle and the unknowns of the pandemic last fall, I didn't want to risk going in and out of needing to quarantine at a moment's notice. This option also gave us the flexibility of going on field trips when things started to open up, traveling and visiting family members, all while taking precautions. Homeschooling the kids has been a unique experience that has been a challenge, but also very rewarding. We've had good days and tough days that's allowed me to have a better understanding and relationship with my kids and a better understanding of how they learn. I actually surprised myself with how much I enjoyed teaching them. Come fall, I plan to re-enroll them in Middleton Public Schools. They miss their friends and teachers. Whether I'm elected to the school committee or not, I plan on still having a very active role in their education. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
Earlier in my campaign, I was asked a very similar question. At the time, I refused to discuss my children as part of the campaign. I refused to discuss the very personal reasons my wife and I made the decisions that we made over the past year. And tonight, I'm going to be consistent and I'm going to stick to my principles and not address this question for the same reason. That said, I struggle a little bit to really understand the relevance of this question and the campaign. As a school committee member, my role would be one of fiduciary responsibility, where I would need to consider the broader community's needs and not base decisions off of personal reasoning. So while I hope the town can appreciate the line that I'm drawing when it comes to discussing matters of personal nature, I also want you to know that I will represent you and not just my family's interests.
Thank you. Mr. Bourgeois.
So my two children have been in Middleton's remote 2nd and 4th grades all year. My son learns best when he has space to move and he needs consistency of routine. It's critical to his success. So we had extensive conversations last summer with the staff at Fuller Meadow regarding his IEP services and what they would look like in each model. And we ultimately decided that it was best for him to begin in the remote model. That required help from my parents and my in-laws during the week. So we kept our daughter home to reduce the risk of catching and transmitting COVID to them. Both of my children have truly enjoyed the remote experience this year. My son has significantly closed many of his previously identified achievement gaps. As such, we decided it was best to keep him in the remote model all year. And in February, we gave our daughter the option to return in person, and she expressed that she loves her classmates and her teacher too much, and she wanted to finish the year in this model. Both of my children are extremely excited to be back in the school building next fall with their friends and classmates. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buser.
I have 4 kids, 8th grade, 6th grade, 4th grade, 2nd grade, all boys. My wife and I both work full-time and we live in Brigadoon. We have professional jobs, but we're not that fancy. I rely on the schools. I saw the toll that remote was taking on my children, the negative toll. To be clear about this, I'm the only candidate where my kids were in Middleton Public Schools full-time since it got the green light by the school committee. As an individual, I believe in science and facts. When the experts and regulators cleared the way, gave the green light, my family was ready to go. I was thrilled that the school committee had the courage to act on the heels of this guidance and clearance and make it happen. I will say that others choose not to go back, and that's fine. But most in the community did want to go back at the time. The school committee needs to support the majority of the community will. It's literally the job. But we have empathy and we want to support those who don't want to go back. So I've always been supportive of the remote option provisions for those who need it.
Thank you. We'll now go to closing statements, and we'll start with Ms. Aiken.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to all of the candidates for being here tonight. I'm running for school committee to advocate for the students, represent the residents, and give back to the community. The current school committee has done a tremendous job this past year. It is my goal, if elected, to keep that momentum going. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees defines the school committee's job is to hire and fire the superintendent, approve a budget, and set policy. I believe that this job, especially this past year, is so much more than that. I promise to listen, show empathy, and make decisions based on facts and what the community sees fit. I hold no other agenda, no special interest. There will be no politics. If anything good has come out of this pandemic, it's the relationships and better understanding of people in this town. I'm truly blessed to be surrounded by so much greatness. Lastly, I will leave you with a quote from Winston Churchill. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. I ask for your vote today and on June 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
Well, first, I want to thank all of you who have tuned in tonight. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day lives to hear why I believe I'm a great candidate for school committee. I'd like to circle back to a fundamental question. Why am I running? And it's simple. I love this town. I love the community. And at the heart of all of it are our wonderful schools. I also think I bring great qualifications to the table that will have a very positive impact. For instance, I'm a consensus builder. I can work with just about anybody, but I'll certainly bring diversity of thought to the table. As a passionate adaptive leader, I'm capable of evolving to address tomorrow's unforeseen challenges. And I'm a relationship builder looking to help foster and strengthen relationships between the school committee and our educators. Finally, I'm a listener and someone who's going to connect with the community in an inclusive way to ensure that you all have a voice. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bourgeois.
And first and foremost, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this forum together tonight. And I also would like to commend all candidates for their desire to serve as local elected officials. In addition to my experience as a parent with 2 children in the elementary schools, I have an extensive background and experience in budget and finance as a certified public accountant. I am also accustomed to working on dynamic, collaborative, and interdependent teams, as well as developing strong relationships based on mutual respect and trust. Last summer, I was selected to serve on the Howe Manning Pandemic Reopening Committee, and I was very impressed by the spirit of collaboration, creative thinking, and diversity of perspectives of the reopening committee members. This experience has inspired me to become more involved in our school community and to seek election to the Middleton Elementary School Committee. I would be honored if you would consider me with one of your 2 votes on June 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buser.
Thank you very much for hosting me. And again, thanks to all the other candidates. I know them all. They're all great families. So it's great to have this crew here trying to support the town. Property value, business development, the standard of living, and the attractiveness of Middleton is tied to school success. I will defend the quality of our great schools. I promise to be a strong, no-nonsense voice for the community and the children, of course, when it comes to negotiations, good faith negotiations with unions and the administration. I will stress empathy, accountability, transparency, and good faith throughout. I'm endorsed by the majority of the current school committee. If you out there in Middleton like the fact that our open schools and our resilience and perseverance over the last year have been a role model for common sense and frankly, the envy of families across Massachusetts this past year, and want that same care, thoughtfulness, common sense, and frankly, bravery to help guide us through tomorrow's challenges, and please consider me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dubois.
Again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and also to my fellow candidates. I believe my professional experience in education and my personal experience with our daughter in special education, combined with my involvement in our community and schools, sets me apart from the other candidates. In recent days, several community members have reached out to me as a trusted community member myself and as a friend in an attempt to bridge the division in our community school committee and teachers. I strongly feel that if given the opportunity to serve on the Middleton School Committee, I would continue my reputation as working collaboratively and objectively, always in the best interest of our students, while working to amend the division and continuing the excellence in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Q&A with the regional school committee candidates. There's one available seat, open seat for a 3-year term. First question. What do you think are the top 3 most important issues the school district will face in the next 3 years? And we will start with Dominic Casamasma.
Thank you very much. And thank you for putting this together tonight. The 3 most important issues I see the school district facing the next 3 years are, 1, the obvious, moving on after COVID. We need to help our students overcome all of the emotional and social stresses that they've had to deal with over the last 14 months. We have to teach them to lead instead of constantly looking to follow. 2nd, budget and financial responsibility. This is always going to be an issue regardless of what district we live in. Unfortunately, we're never going to have too much money, and we're never going to have difficulty finding ways to appropriate those funds. So we need to constantly review our needs, versus our wants, and make the best decisions possible. Lastly, recruitment. Recruiting and maintaining a highly qualified team of professionals and creating a supportive and nurturing work environment that will ensure that we retain and continue to attract the best of the best when it comes to our teachers and staff.
Thank you. Eric Golovchenko.
So for me, the 3 most important issues that I've been thinking about a lot lately are the athletic fees, which a lot of people I've been seeing talk about, and I've been hearing talk about. And I'm going to speak more on it in a later question, but I do think that the solution for that is going to involve some sort of partnership between school committees, school administration, taxpayers, and parents in the Tri-10 area. And again, there'll be more details about that later. Dropping enrollment. In the past decade, our enrollment has dropped 18%, while the 3 towns have grown by almost 9%. What are the factors that are causing this? And are they even something that we should or can do anything about? I think that this is something that's important for us to look into. And finally, communication. Regardless of where you stand, it's a big theme I've seen over and over again. It's clear that the current methods are not adequate anymore. So we need to explore additional avenues for communication to make sure everybody can be informed and provide valuable feedback in a timely manner.
Thank you. Question 2. On return to school this past year, what decision did you make for your children regarding school? Were they homeschooled, remote, or did they return? And what was your reasoning for your decision? And we'll start with Mr. Golovchenko.
So I want to start first by acknowledging this is a highly personal question. I'm willing to answer it, but I'm totally fine with everybody who isn't. I do feel it's important to also point out that whatever choice parents and guardians make for their children was by definition the right one for them, and we can't reasonably compare choices as every family's circumstances were different this past year. Both of our children were fully remote until recently when they went back full in person. We chose full remote at first because there was so little known about the virus and how it would either affect the children or be transmitted by children, and not to mention the potential danger posed to their teachers and other staff in the schools. Over time, more was learned and things felt safer for the younger children, although high school children appeared to be affected similarly to adults in their 20s. Now that case numbers are dropping and vaccination numbers are rising, we are cautiously optimistic that their learning environment has become more reliably safe for their needs.
Thank you. Mr. Casamasma.
Thank you. My wife and I chose a full return to in-person learning for both of our children. one at Fuller Meadow and one at Howe Manning. We felt the rewards greatly outweighed the risks. Were we nervous at first? Absolutely. But we trusted in our kids being disciplined with the mask wearing, hand washing, social distancing guidelines. And we felt the plans and procedures put in place by the elementary schools realized the benefits of getting our kids back. They made special provisions to utilize the Howe Manning campus for the Fuller Meadow children, which I thought was paramount. Having a first grader who lost part of his first grade year and then being able to go back in second grade was fantastic. This allowed the most vulnerable first and second graders to get back in person sooner. Have there been bumps in the road? Yes, of course, but they were managed efficiently. Effort was put into the plan and it worked. It allowed life to continue. And now we just need to keep moving forward by leading and not following.
Thank you. Question 3. Will you support the development of an athletic committee to find solutions to the dangerous, outdated playing conditions at Masco's fields and courts, as well as do whatever it takes to lower the athletic fees? We'll start with Mr. Casa-Massimino.
Yes, I would support this. Our athletic fee structure seems to be grossly outdated and needs to be addressed. I believe we need to make adjustments that allow all families, the same opportunities, implement a family cap, and adjust our fees so that we are more in line with the comparable surrounding communities. I think that if we've learned anything over the last 14 months, we've realized the importance of our children's activities outside of the classroom. The social and emotional benefits from athletics can't be ignored. Friendships are made and fostered. Kids continue to learn how to support and encourage one another, and that can't always be taught in a book. With that being said, we need to make sure our programs are the best they can be, offering safer conditions and giving the athletes the tools they need to succeed. The lessons of teamwork, camaraderie, self-pride, and respect for others taught in the field will carry over into the classroom and will forever teach our kids to believe in themselves, and not only that, to help others to do the same.
Thank you. Mr. Golovchenko.
So it is my understanding that there's actually already a group working on the athletic fees issue. This is an issue that will likely require a partnership between the school committee and parents, as there will probably need to be a mix of budget fixes and infusions of revenue from a combination of tax and non-tax sources. If there isn't already a group working on the fields and courts issue, then I would certainly support forming such a group to investigate the issues, determine the causes, source solutions, and report back to the school committee for votes and implementation. As such solutions will most likely require funding, another partnership will likely need to be approached to ensure that we can find the funding either from budget or from outside sources.
Thank you. Question 4. What steps will you take to keep special education students in the district and help avoid the expenses associated with out-of-district placements? And we'll start with Mr. Golovchenko. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I hit the button. This question presumes that the best thing for these students is to keep them in the district. If our district doesn't have the resources required to serve a particular student, then it is the mandate of the IEP team by state law to make the determination of outplacement. The school committee doesn't have a direct role to play in this process. Again, by law, and I think this needs to be emphasized. Where the school committee comes into play in this process is looking at funding. If there are enough students that need particular services such that the cost of those services in district per student will outweigh the cost of administration oversight of outplacement of those students, then it makes sense to bring those programs into the district. If not, then it's a disservice to both the taxpayers and the students involved to try to force them into suboptimal services in the district. It's also going against the spirit of the state law to do so.
Thank you. Mr. Casa-Massima.
Thank you. First and foremost, I believe that we need to continue to do all that we can to ensure that the teaching staff has the tools, training necessary to identify the special needs of our students as early as possible. In my mind, as with anything in life, the sooner that a situation is identified, the sooner that we can implement a resolution plan. And I think that needs to be number one. And the students' needs have to come first. No exception, no exceptions can be made. I think Eric and I can agree on this. If we find better ways to accommodate the needs of the special education students, and we're able to keep them in the district, then I think, that would be a welcomed outcome. But there's so many different situations that they all need to be looked at individually. And, at the end of the day, we need to create the best environment for that specific child. And if that means outside the district, then it means outside the district.
Thank you. Fifth and final question. For over 35 years, the League of Women Voters has organized Household Hazardous Waste Day in the parking lot of Masco. Last year, the school committee did not give us permission to do this. Would you support the Tri-Town annual event being held at Masco, scheduled for October 23rd of this year? And we'll start with Mr. Casamassima.
I would not only support it, I would ask you, will you be taking volunteers? Because I have a 12-year-old daughter that is constantly making me recycle, or making sure I recycle, I should say. If there are organizations within our town that take the time and effort to put something like this together, then we owe it to them and our community to support that, always.
Thank you. And I've noted and logged your daughter's willingness to volunteer.
I'll send her contact info.
Mr. Golovchenko.
This past year, there were many activities that didn't happen per the normal process because we were all in the middle of a pandemic. It's my understanding that Masco facilities and properties weren't available for any non-Masco uses this past fall, so as to limit personnel flow and mitigate COVID risks. Such a decision is a reasonable one in my view, given the pandemic environment we were in. But given the current projection for case numbers and likely reduction of COVID-related risks for the fall, I would expect that the vast majority of activities could return to normal operation, including this valued event. According to a Facebook post today from the Middleton Public Health Department, I believe this event is already scheduled for October 23rd, 2021, and I would fully support that. And my daughter's a little bit older and would probably be upset with me to volunteer her, but I will certainly tell her about it, and she may very well volunteer herself.
Great, thank you. And now we'll go to closing statements, and we will start with Mr. Golovchenko.
So thank you for listening to my views on these questions, and thank you to League Women Voters for putting this all together. I feel that committees are strongest when they represent the diversity of views of their stakeholders. My hope is that if elected, I can bring a more science-based perspective to this committee, adding to the diversity of the committee and thereby strengthening it. I'll be bringing 25 years of biotech, manufacturing, engineering, and quality experience to the committee to help analyze problems, determine root causes, and find practical, economical solutions. This school district is one of the best in the state. While I recognize that our rankings in some recently published national surveys have been downgraded from previous years, I still feel we have an amazing school with talented staff. I do think we should look deeply into the data to try to figure out why our rankings changed so we can work towards efficiently addressing the opportunities presented by this challenge.
Thank you. And Mr. Casamassima.
Thank you. Again, thank you again for putting this together tonight. It was extremely informative, and it was a breath of fresh air to see. It's so nice to see so many people wanting to give back to their community. We moved here in 2015 from Wakefield, and in Wakefield, I wanted to get involved when I didn't like something or I wanted more answers, so I got involved with the Board of Appeals, and I sat on that board. Moving to this town, which was a blessing for our kids and for our family. We try to instill values in our kids that of, if you see something, speak up. If you want to make a change, speak up. So I'm here. I want to see changes, and I want to speak up. And I'm here for, all the families, all the children. And I would really appreciate your vote. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. And lastly, we will go to the question and answers for library trustee. It's a vote for 2 seats for 3-year terms. The candidate for re-election, Donna Bambury, could not be here this evening, and she was invited to submit a statement to be read here, but she did not submit one. The first question, what do you think is the biggest challenge for public libraries today? And we'll start with Arthur Baradina.
Thank you. I believe that the pandemic has hampered all of the activities that had been very successfully transpiring at the Flint and other libraries. Now that the restrictions have started to subside and be adjusted, I believe the patrons are anxious to get back to normal operations. Moving forward, I have complete confidence that Melissa and her staff will continue to move forward with a safe and successful.
Thank you. Ms. Allison Sloan, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight and your patience and hanging in for library trustee. I want to introduce myself as a person who has worked at the Reading Public Library for 30 years, and I just retired in February, so the information is still fresh in my head. And I've worked in libraries locally throughout the network, Merrimack Valley, and the state. And I basically studied foundations of library services when I first started working at the library, and discovered the mission of libraries is to offer the right to read and access to information. And following this very, very difficult pandemic year, I believe the issues of equality and equity have moved to the forefront of what libraries were meant to offer since 1731, when Benjamin Franklin founded the first library in America, to offer public access to information and books. Back then it was books. And this is a broad umbrella of responsibilities that libraries are tasked with providing to our citizens, and remains one of our biggest challenges to fulfill a passionate mission, an open door policy, and to welcome everyone to the library to provide excellent customer service and knowledgeable.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Question 2. What ideas do you have to make the public library even more relevant to the community? And we'll start with Ms. Sloan.
Hi. I have worked with the leadership at the library, and I would continue to view Melissa Gaspar, our director, and the dedicated staff that communicates with our patrons daily, and my fellow trustees, to identify and implement policies and programs and procedures that serve the wants and the needs of our community. That includes making Flint Library a community center for town organizations, a destination for all ages, seniors, children's, teens, adults, and families. And I'd like to consider programming for all our constituencies, reaching out to meet and talk and introduce materials to the people through exciting creative programs and partnerships with business, book discussion groups. I think these are very, very important, and I think the people are asking for it.
Thank you. Mr. Baradina.
I believe the programs being offered pre-pandemic will restart and continue to grow. Increasing programs for all ages will help bring relevance back to our library. Having access to computers and a quiet place for school-age children and high schoolers to study and do homework, as well as socialize, can continue to be a wonderful place to learn. We have such great programs pre-pandemic for toddlers, for elderly, and I believe that once we reopen, I think that you'll see that our library will continue to flourish and be a success.
Thank you. Question 3. Do you have a library card, Mr. Baradina?
Yes, I do have a library card. Actually, I have a library card in 2 states. Since I was in elementary school, I've always taken advantage of what the library had to offer. And even during the pandemic, when able, I was able to take out books electronically and use the Mystic Valley system to search and get what I needed for my reading pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sloan.
I absolutely have a library card, not only from elementary school, and I lived in New Jersey for 50 years, and I still have that library card in my file cabinet. I've always been a library patron. I have my library card memorized, though probably not yours. That may happen in the future. I worked at my college library, in my children's school media center, and of course for the Reading Public Library for 30 years. And I believe that a library is a valued friend in the community.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on reopening the library? And we'll start with Ms. Sloan.
Okay, I appreciate the hard choices that libraries handled to balance the mission of access of information and services, and yet to assure a safe and healthy environment. And this last year, with buildings and facilities closed in order to be safe, has been very, very difficult. It's a testament to our determination and customer service of the library staff that we have been able to remain on duty in the background, thinking outside the box and finding ways to provide library services. My thoughts on reopening the library are to follow the required guidelines of the governor and of course of our town administration and our guidelines. And I'm here to assure you that libraries want to open as much as the patrons want them to open, and that as safely and quickly as possible, we need to open our doors to offer full services and friendly community space.
Thank you. Mr. Baradino.
Thank you. I anxiously await the full opening, but I believe the library is opening in a safe and considerate manner, following the guidelines, and safety for the staff is most important. And with those considerations, they should be open soon.
All right, thank you. And now we'll go to closing statements, and we'll start with Mr. Baradino.
Well, thank you very much for, again, hosting this event. And I've been a friend of the library for many years, and I enjoy everything about the Middleton, the Flint Library. And I believe the Friends do a wonderful job. The library staff is outstanding. I think that with my business background and my charitable endeavors that I've lived with my entire life, I believe that I will be a great trustee for the library, and hope that I can win your consideration for that vote. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Ms. Sloan.
Yes, hi. I served in Reading under two directors as the recording secretary for the Board of Library Trustees in Reading. And I understand how trustees work with the library. I understand the policies that as a staff member I've worked with, and how to maintain a budget and how to work within that budget. I've dealt with acquisitions and purchasing at the library. I've also done a lot of programs in readers advisory, and I've been on a Massachusetts Library State Committee as chairperson. I've also worked under the Board of Library Commissioners to develop a statewide certification program for paralibrarians. And I understand the teamwork of a librarian working with a paralibrarian. I bring extensive understanding and experience, and I'd be proud to serve on the Middleton Board of Library Trustees, help open the doors of Flint Library once again. And I ask you for your vote today and on June 12th.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the question and answer portion for candidates this evening. We'll now go to Bill Renaud, the chair of the Master Development Committee, who will speak to ballot question 1. Mr. Renaud.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Smith, and thank you for moderating tonight, and a big thank you to the League for allowing the Master Development Planning Committee some time to discuss this exciting project for our community. I'll try to be brief, as I'm kind of an add-on here at the end, but I'm trying to take care of everyone's time for tonight. So back in 2019, Middleton residents approved the acquisition of the former Middleton Golf Course at 105 South Main Street for a new municipal complex. As a voter, you now have the unique opportunity to approve the construction of a transformative project that will meet the needs of our community now and well into the future. 4 municipal buildings in town have long outlived their useful lives. The fire station, originally built in 1954 as a combined DPW and fire station, Our police station, which we purchased from Danvers for $1 back in the 80s. Our senior center, which was built in 1848 as our original town hall, and the town hall building today, which is built as a school back in 1860. They've served the town well, but it's time to move on. After an extensive planning process of over 2 years that included dozens of public meetings, several community planning forums, and a townwide survey, the Master Development Planning Committee final recommendation was to build a combined fire and police building and a combined community center and town hall surrounded by a new town common on the property. We propose to do this as one large project. The cost of constructing all buildings now is estimated to be $61.7 million in 2021 dollars. Delaying the project or building it in phases will result in dramatically higher costs. Let me explain. Historically low interest rates that we see in our mortgage actually follows over to municipal bonding as well. When we initially began looking at the project in 2019 compared to today, we have a savings in interest payments alone of over $25 million to the taxpayer. Secondly, by combining the buildings and constructing all of these as one large project, we can save over $7 million through economy of scale, sharing of certain building spaces and systems. So combining both the savings for our project as one whole project and the interest rates, we're saving about $32 million of taxpayer dollars in this project. Looking at the tri-town average tax bills, you would see that Middleton is about $2,000 less than our peer communities in Boxford and Topsfield based on the average single family home costs. If this project is approved, Middleton will still have the lowest tax bill in the tri-town. We are expected to add around $1,000 of annual tax impact in the most expensive year for this project. So wrapping up, voting yes at both town meeting and at the polls is a vote to move forward with plans to construct a combined police and fire building and a combined town hall, new town hall and community center, as well as a new town common. Voting yes will allow the town to take advantage of historic low interest rates and construction costs. And finally, voting yes ensures that all Middleton residents' needs are met today and well into the future. If you're unsure of whether you'd like to vote affirmatively or not, we have plenty of information located on the town's website. There's a link there that has a bunch of the reports that we've developed over the past few years. Also has a bunch of videos of the existing buildings, as well as a bunch of the meetings that we've had and a bunch of PowerPoints that have laid out, kind of our thought process throughout the last 2 years. I would urge you to support Article 22 at town meeting on June 5th, and also to vote affirmatively on at the polls on June 12th. And that's about all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem.
And that concludes tonight's proceedings. Please remember that Middleton Town Election is Saturday, June 12th, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. at Fuller Meadow School. And we'd like to thank Middleton Community TV for covering tonight's proceeding. Please check their website for rebroadcast times and dates. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you for watching and good night.